London, spring 1815. By the time Eliza Whitmore stepped into the Assembly Hall on Brookhaven Street, she already knew how the night would end. Not with laughter. Not with admiration. Not even with polite indifference. It would end the way all such evenings did for her, with whispers that followed her like shadows, with smiles sharpened into weapons, with the unspoken consensus that she did not belong. The chandeliers blazed overhead, casting golden light across silk gowns and polished shoes, across jewels that caught the eye and fortunes that commanded respect. Music drifted through the hall, elegant and restrained, a careful performance of refinement. To most of the women present, this ball was an opportunity, to be noticed, to be chosen, to advance. To Eliza it was endurance. She paused just inside the entrance, smoothing the front of her pale gray gown with fingers that had learned not to tremble in public. The fabric was well kept but unmistakably out of fashion. Last season's cut, modest where others dared extravagance. She wore no jewels, only a simple ribbon at her throat and gloves mended so carefully the seams were nearly invisible. Nearly. Eliza lifted her chin and moved forward. She had mastered this walk years ago. The measured pace. The calm posture. The expression that revealed nothing. It was the walk of a woman who knew she was being judged and refused to beg for mercy. Behind her, her younger sister clutched her arm briefly. "You don't have to stay long," Clara whispered, hope and fear tangled in her voice. At 19, Clara still believed kindness could outweigh cruelty. "We can leave after the first set." Eliza smiled, not the polite curve she wore for society, but the softer one reserved for family. "I'll stay as long as you wish." It was always the same answer. Someone had to stand between Clara and the worst of it. Someone had to absorb the glances, the murmurs, the reputation that had attached itself to the Whitmore name like a disease that refused to fade. Eliza had accepted that role without complaint a decade ago, when their father's financial collapse became public spectacle. She was 20 then. Old enough to understand. Young enough to hope it might pass. It never did. The Whitmores were no longer invited to the best houses, only to those that enjoyed the sport of quiet humiliation. Tonight's hostess, Lady Veronica Hale, was particularly fond of such sport. Eliza felt Lady Veronica's gaze before she saw her. The woman stood near the center of the room, radiant in deep emerald silk, her blonde curls arranged with calculated perfection. Lady Veronica was beautiful in the way that commanded attention, but it was her smile, cool, knowing, precise, that set Eliza's spine straightening instinctively. That smile had ruined lives. "Eliza Whitmore," someone murmured nearby, not quite softly enough. "I thought she'd finally given up attending." Another voice replied, amused, "Oh no, she always comes. She's almost admirable." Almost. Eliza heard it all. She always did. She moved toward the wall, positioning herself where she could observe without being observed too closely. That was the safest place. From here she could watch Clara dance if someone asked her, and tonight someone likely would. Clara was still untainted in the eyes of society, her youth granting her temporary mercy. Temporary. Eliza folded her hands and breathed. Then the room shifted. It was subtle at first, a pause in conversation, a ripple of curiosity. Heads turned. Whispers realigned themselves toward a single point near the terrace doors. Eliza followed their gaze. He stood apart from the crowd as though the assembly had arranged itself around him without his consent. Tall, taller than most men present, with dark hair worn longer than fashion favored, his posture was rigid, controlled. His coat was black, impeccably tailored, and bore no unnecessary ornament. No smile softened his expression. His presence alone seemed to drain warmth from the air. Sebastian Ashford, Duke of Blackmore. The name passed through the hall like a held breath. Eliza frowned slightly. She had heard nothing of his arrival. That alone was unusual. A duke did not enter London society unnoticed, unless he wished it so. "He's terrifying," someone whispered. "I heard he hasn't been seen in London for years. They say he ruined 3 men at the gaming tables without raising his voice. No wife. No known mistresses. Practically a myth." Eliza studied him with professional detachment. She had long since stopped allowing curiosity to turn into hope. Still, there was something about him, an air of restraint so absolute it bordered on severity. He did not scan the room for admiration. He did not engage. He watched, as if assessing. A chill traced its way down her spine. Ah! Lady Veronica's voice cut through the murmurs, smooth and deliberate. Just as I hoped. Eliza stiffened. Lady Veronica approached her with the grace of a woman who had never been denied anything she wanted. Her smile widened as she took in Eliza's appearance, her gaze lingering a fraction too long on the simplicity of her gown. "My dear Miss Whitmore," Lady Veronica said sweetly. "How fortunate that you are unoccupied this evening." Eliza inclined her head. "Lady Veronica. I was just thinking," Lady Veronica continued, raising her voice slightly, "that our distinguished guest appears dreadfully alone. And who better to offer him company than someone accustomed to quiet evenings?" The cruelty was elegant, perfectly delivered. Around them attention sharpened. This was entertainment. Eliza understood instantly. Lady Veronica intended to send her, to parade her, toward the most forbidding man in the room, expecting rejection or ridicule. Either outcome would delight the audience. For a heartbeat the old instinct flared. Retreat. Decline. Apologize. Then Eliza straightened. "I would be happy to make his acquaintance," she said calmly. Lady Veronica blinked just once before recovering. "How generous of you." Eliza turned before the woman could add another blade to the sentence. The walk across the ballroom felt longer than any she had taken before. Every step echoed with memory, with other rooms, other moments of judgment. She could feel eyes on her back, hear the hush spreading as anticipation sharpened into something hungry. She stopped before him and curtsied perfectly. "Your Grace," she said. "I am Eliza Whitmore." Sebastian Ashford looked at her. Not past her. Not through her. At her. Up close, his eyes were a cool steel gray, unervingly focused. Silence stretched. Eliza kept her posture steady, refusing to fill it with nervous explanation. Finally he spoke. "Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice low even. "I assume this introduction was not your idea." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Eliza's brows lifted slightly. "I find honesty serves better than denial," she replied. "No, Your Grace. It was not." A corner of his mouth curved, barely. Not a smile. Recognition. "Then we are in agreement," he said. "Please sit." He gestured to the chair beside him. The first ripple of shock moved through the room. Eliza sat. For a moment neither spoke. Music resumed hesitantly, conversation creeping back in uncertain tones. Eliza became acutely aware of the proximity between them, of the quiet authority he carried without effort. "You are not what they expected," he said at last. "Nor are you," she replied. This time, his gaze sharpened with interest. "They expected me to humiliate you," he said. "Yes." "And you expected me to do it." "Yes." "Why didn't I?" Eliza considered him. "Because you're observant. And because humiliation requires cruelty, not power." Silence. Then a quiet sound. A low, surprised exhale that might have been laughter. "Tell me," Sebastian Ashford said slowly, "are all of London's gatherings designed to be this tedious?" Eliza felt something shift. Something dangerous. "I'm afraid tedium is the purpose," she said. "We gather to measure one another's worth. Pleasure is incidental." "That," he said, "is the most honest assessment I've heard all evening." They spoke then, not of weather or fashion but of books, of ideas. Of the war's aftermath and the way society clung desperately to old hierarchies. Eliza forgot, for brief moments, to be guarded. Sebastian listened, not politely but intently. The hour passed unnoticed. When he stood and offered his hand for the next dance, the silence was absolute. "They're staring," Eliza murmured. "Let them," he replied. "I am." As they moved across the floor, something fragile and unfamiliar stirred in Eliza's chest. Not hope, she had learned better, but recognition. As if someone, finally, saw the woman she had been forced to become. When the music ended, Sebastian did not release her hand at once. "Miss Whitmore," he said quietly, "may I call upon you tomorrow?" The question was simple. The consequences were not. Eliza met his gaze, fully aware of the eyes watching, the whispers already forming. "Yes," she said. And somewhere in the room, Lady Veronica Hale realized her game had failed. London did not forgive quietly. By the following morning, Eliza Whitmore's name had already been spoken in rooms she had never been invited into. It traveled faster than truth ever did, twisted, sharpened, embellished with intention she had never possessed. A duke did not ask to visit a woman like Eliza Whitmore without consequence. She stood at the narrow window of their Camden Row townhouse, watching the street below with a tightness in her chest she could not soothe. The house was modest but respectable, brick-worn smooth by time, its interior carefully maintained by years of discipline rather than wealth. Every chair had been repaired instead of replaced. Every rug cleaned and turned until its pattern faded evenly. It was the home of people who endured. "Eliza," her mother said softly from the doorway, "you've barely slept." Eliza did not turn. There was little point. Mrs. Whitmore hesitated. Her hair had gone silver early, not from age but from worry. "Do you expect him?" "Yes." The word surprised them both with its certainty. Eliza had replayed the previous evening in relentless detail. Every look, every pause, every inflection in Sebastian Ashford's voice. She did not mistake courtesy for affection. She had survived too long for that. But she recognized intention when she saw it. An intention from a man like him was dangerous. A carriage slowed outside. Eliza's breath caught. The sound of finely shod horses on stone did not belong on Camden Row. Curtains shifted along the street as neighbors leaned toward their windows, curiosity already sharpening into speculation. Her mother joined her at the window just as the carriage came to a halt. Black lacquer. No crest displayed. Discretion, deliberate and unmistakable. The footman descended, opened the door, and Sebastian Ashford stepped onto the pavement as though he had always belonged there. He did not look around. Did not hesitate. He approached the house with measured steps and knocked. The sound echoed through the narrow hallway like a challenge. Eliza smoothed her sleeves, suddenly acutely aware of the simplicity of her gown, the faint ink stain on her fingers she had failed to scrub away. She drew a breath and went to answer it herself. Sebastian stood straight-backed, hat in hand, his expression composed. Up close, in daylight, the severity of him softened just enough to reveal exhaustion beneath restraint. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "Thank you for receiving me." "You are welcome, Your Grace," she replied. "Please, come in." He stepped inside and the house seemed to contract around him, not because he was large but because his presence altered the space. Her mother curtsied. Clara stared with unguarded awe. Sebastian inclined his head respectfully. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Miss Whitmore." There was no condescension in his tone. No embarrassment. Eliza noticed. She always noticed. They sat in the front room, modestly furnished, sunlight filtering through lace curtains. Tea was brought. Conversation followed, polite at first, restrained by the awareness that this meeting would be dissected mercilessly by others. "I won't linger," Sebastian said after a moment. "I am aware my presence carries weight." Eliza met his gaze. "Then you understand why I must ask you not to return." Silence fell. Her mother stiffened. Clara looked between them, alarmed. Sebastian did not bristle. He studied Eliza as if she were a problem worth solving. "You believe I act without consideration," he said. "I believe," Eliza replied carefully, "that society will punish me for your interest, and punish you for persisting. I am not concerned with society." "You should be," she said quietly. "It destroys what it cannot control." Pause. Then he stood. "Walk with me," he said. It was not a command. It was a request that carried certainty. They stepped outside together, the door closing behind them with finality. The street seemed suddenly louder, closer. Sebastian kept his pace unhurried, matching hers precisely. "Why did you accept my attention last night?" he asked. "Because declining would have been its own humiliation." "And today?" "Today," Eliza said, "is different. Today your interest becomes narrative." He stopped walking. She stopped with him. "You believe I don't understand narrative," he said softly. "I believe," she answered, "that you underestimate how eager they are to destroy me." Something hardened behind his eyes, not anger but recognition. "I was raised," Sebastian said, "in a house where affection was currency and silence was punishment. Reputation was weaponized long before London learned the art. I am not ignorant of cruelty." Eliza swallowed. "Then you know what this will cost." "Yes." "And you proceed anyway?" "Yes." They walked on. By the time they reached Kensington Gardens, whispers followed them like insects drawn to heat. Heads turned. Conversations paused. It was unmistakable now, a duke walking beside the Whitmore disgrace, not out of obligation but choice. Lady Veronica Hale waited near the central path, flanked by two women who smiled with anticipation. "Your Grace," Lady Veronica said smoothly, intercepting them. "How unexpected." Sebastian inclined his head. "Lady Hale." Her gaze slid to Eliza, sharp and glittering. "Miss Whitmore. How charming that you've acquired such distinguished companionship." Eliza did not respond. Sebastian did. "Miss Whitmore has acquired nothing," he said calmly. "I am here of my own volition." A faint flush crept into Lady Veronica's cheeks. "Of course. One only worries about misunderstandings." "Only those who rely on them," Sebastian replied. The exchange was brief. It was devastating. By evening the damage was done. The pamphlet appeared the next morning. Printed cheaply. Distributed generously. A scandal sheet that relied on implication rather than proof. The danger of desperate women. A duke ensnared by calculation. Eliza read it once. Then again. Her name was not printed, but it was unmistakable. Accusations of manipulation. Of emotional performance. Of calculated poverty designed to attract sympathy. Clara wept openly. Her mother sat in silence. Eliza folded the paper carefully, hand steady. "This ends now," she said. That afternoon she sent word declining all future contact with the Duke of Blackmore. Sebastian received the message without surprise. He arrived anyway. This time, when Eliza opened the door, her expression was resolved. "You should not be here," she said. "I know," he replied. "That is why I am." She stepped aside. Inside, tension filled the room like smoke. "I will not ruin you," Eliza said before he could speak. "Whatever this is, it stops." "Is that your decision?" he asked. "Or society's?" "I don't have the luxury of separating the two." He moved closer, not touching, but near enough that she felt the warmth of him. "Look at me," he said. She did. "I am not a man easily steered," he said quietly. "No paper, no whisper, no woman could compel me to stand where I do now." "That is not protection," she replied. "That is defiance." "Yes." Her breath shook. "And defiance," she whispered, "is a war I cannot survive." He did not argue. Instead he said, "Then allow me to fight it." Eliza closed her eyes. For the first time in 10 years, fear was not her only companion. London did not wait for permission to be cruel. 3 days after the pamphlet appeared, the crowd came to Camden Row. They did not arrive with violence at first. That would have been honest. Instead, they gathered with curiosity, men pretending to stroll, women pausing with baskets in hand, boys lingering too long at corners. Their whispers grew bold as the hours passed, until discretion collapsed under the weight of shared judgment. Eliza heard them before she saw them. Voices carried upward through the narrow street, sharp with speculation and amusement. Someone laughed. Someone else repeated a phrase from the scandal sheet with relish. Clara stood frozen near the stairs, pale and trembling. "They're saying your name now," she whispered. Eliza closed her eyes. So this was the end of endurance. She had believed humiliation was survivable. That if she bent low enough, kept her head down long enough, society would eventually grow bored. She had been wrong. It did not grow bored. It grew impatient. "Eliza," her mother said quietly, "we should send Clara away." "No," Eliza replied at once. "We stay together." She went to the front room and opened the curtains. The sight confirmed what she already knew. They were not here for truth. They were here for spectacle. She lowered the curtain again and straightened her shoulders. "I will leave London," she said. "Tonight." Her mother reached for her hand. "You shouldn't have to." "I know." Eliza managed a thin smile. "But I won't allow them to finish what they've started." There was a knock at the door. Not tentative. Not polite. Commanding. Clara gasped. Her mother stiffened. Eliza moved first. When she opened the door, Sebastian Ashford stood on the step, coat dark against the gray afternoon, his expression carved from resolve. The street fell silent. Every eye turned. Eliza stared at him. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he said. "I came anyway." Behind him, the crowd leaned closer, sensing something was about to break. "Eliza," her mother murmured in warning. Sebastian did not raise his voice. He did not need to. I am not here privately, he said. I am here publicly. Her heart slammed painfully against her ribs. Sebastian, she whispered, the name escaping before she could stop it. Please. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, he cut in, gently but firmly. Step outside with me. The words were not a request. Eliza hesitated. Then she stepped forward. The street erupted with sound, whispers, gasps, sharp intakes of breath. Sebastian took her hand, not possessively but openly, deliberately, and turned to face the onlookers. My name is Sebastian Ashford, he said clearly, Duke of Blackmore. The title landed like a blow. I am here to correct a lie. A murmur surged through the crowd. You have accused this woman of manipulation, he continued, his gaze unwavering. Of ambition. Of deceit. You are wrong. Someone scoffed. Another laughed nervously. Sebastian did not acknowledge them. I sought her company, he said. I requested her time. I pursued her acquaintance. Not because she asked, but because she did not. Eliza felt her throat tighten. She has attempted to end this association for my sake, he went on. I refused. That decision is mine alone. The silence was absolute now. If any among you believe I can be coerced, seduced, or misled into attachment, Sebastian said calmly, you do not understand the kind of man I am. He turned to Eliza. And if you believe she owes you explanation, he said softly, you do not understand the kind of woman she is. He faced the crowd again. I intend to marry her. The world seemed to tilt. A gasp rippled outward. Someone dropped something. Eliza's breath left her in a rush she could not control. What are you doing? She whispered, panic flooding her voice. Sebastian looked at her, finally allowing emotion to surface. Choosing, he said. The crowd did not disperse immediately. Scandal never retreated quickly. But it shifted, confusion replacing certainty, doubt eroding cruelty. Some turned away. Others stared as if the ground beneath them had cracked. Sebastian released her hand only when the door closed behind them. Inside, Eliza shook. You cannot do this, she said, voice breaking at last. You cannot sacrifice everything because of me. He removed his gloves slowly, deliberately, as if grounding himself. I am not sacrificing, he said. I am claiming. She shook her head. Your family, your title, your future have always been burdens, he said quietly. You are not. The words undid her. Tears rose despite her efforts to stop them. You don't know what they'll do to you. I do, he replied. And I accept it. There was another knock. This one quieter. Controlled. Sebastian opened the door. A tall man stood there, gray-haired, severe, dressed in understated elegance. His gaze flicked to Eliza with measured assessment. Uncle, Sebastian said flatly. Lord Ashford stepped inside without invitation. This situation must be resolved, the older man said, ignoring Eliza entirely. Privately. Sebastian crossed his arms. Say what you came to say. Lord Ashford finally looked at Eliza. You will be compensated. The word struck like a slap. How much? Eliza asked calmly, surprising even herself. Lord Ashford named a sum large enough to erase her family's debts forever. Eliza met his gaze steadily. No. The man frowned. Think carefully. I have, she replied. You misunderstand me. I am not refusing because I want more. She turned to Sebastian, then back again. I am refusing because I will not disappear to make your world more comfortable. Silence. Lord Ashford studied her anew. Sebastian spoke then. You will leave. Lord Ashford hesitated, then inclined his head stiffly and departed. The door closed. Eliza sagged, exhaustion washing over her. Sebastian caught her before she fell. He did not hold her as a possession. He steadied her as an equal. I will not marry you, Eliza said quietly. He stilled. Not like this, she continued. Not as a rescue. Not as defiance. He nodded slowly. Then how? She lifted her head. If we marry, it will be because we choose each other without fear. Give me that choice. He released her hands and stepped back. You have it, he said. Entirely. That night, Eliza did not flee London. 2 weeks later they left together. Not in triumph. In intention. They married at Blackmore Estate, beneath a sky heavy with wind, witnessed by few. No applause. No spectacle. Only truth. Eliza stood beside him, not hidden, not elevated, standing. London would speak of them for years. But it would never own her again.